one of my accounts in Simi Valley. Apparently there's an escape room right across from it, and I got so mad at like how good this name was because it was literally called Simi Escape.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah,
and I was like, that kind of infuriates me, like how good that is.
Works on so many levels.
It works on so many levels. And it just, I was like, God damn it, I don't want to like this, but I gotta give them, that's pretty good. That is pretty good.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Purpose-Driven Dude. My name is Alex.
And I'm Brad.
And we're coming to you today for episode, what is it, 11? 12? I don't even know where we're at anymore.
Oh, God. Why would you ask me that? I don't know.
I don't know. It is a number of a podcast.
Yes, this is season 1, episode...
Yeah. But yes, this is a podcast about dudism, probably the slowest growing religion in the world.
Based on the Coen brothers film The Big Lebowski and loosely Taoism.
Yep, also loosely like Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, I suppose.
Yeah, Stoicism, Transcendentalism,
whatever ism you really want to apply.
Yeah, as long as your credo is take her easy, then you're welcome.
Yeah, and we discuss various tenets of dudism, and we thought this week it would be good, 10 or 11 or whatever episodes in.
How have we not done this yet?
Well, we're actually going to talk about the probably the greatest dude, arguably, I guess, of them all.
The dude.
So this will be another of our Great Dudes of History series.
Yes, discussing Jeff Lebowski.
Yeah, Jeffrey the Dude Lebowski.
But yeah, before we get into it, it's time for another exciting segment known as Notably Doodly.
Notably Doodly.
I'm going to figure out like a way to introduce that without it being like fucking awkward one of these days.
We just need to get one of our musician friends to like lay down a little bit of music, like transition music, you know?
Yeah. I should talk to somebody about that.
Maybe Seth or something.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, so this week, Notably Doodly fell to me. And I was actually really, really intrigued when I ran across this article. And for Notably Doodly this week, I am going to submit one Miss Arlene Correa Valencia, who is an artist up in the Napa area.
Okay.
And her latest works have focused on depicting what she saw last year in October during the fires in Napa Valley, and specifically what she witnessed in regards to the vineyard workers in the area, many of whom are undocumented.
Okay.
And this is just a fact of so many agricultural industries that as commercial agricultural industries where so many of the workers are often immigrants and often undocumented. Her upcoming series is called In Times of Crisis.
Okay.
And she is depicting many of the just absolutely outrageous things that she witnessed while these fires were rapidly advancing towards the vineyards in Napa. And in many cases, these workers are brought in by private contractors to work in the vineyards.
Right. It should be noted that like this is a legal practice. Like
yes.
This is not like a under the table.
This is not an under the table
like,
any sort of situation. These companies contract out these workers to the vineyards, and they handle harvest, and they're often paid by how much they harvest.
Right. It's by volume.
I believe at some point it's noted that it's about $2,000 a ton.
Wow.
Of grapes
Okay.
that are harvested. But unfortunately, these workers are only paid whenever their job is completed. So September, October being the primary harvest season for wine grapes in California, these workers were literally in the fields harvesting as the fires were advancing on Napa.
Shit.
And it's just absolutely horrifying because Miss Valencia actually has asthma, and she was having to wear an actual respirator while she was observing this. And she observed that many of these workers didn't have this equipment. They were just wearing like bandanas over their mouths and having to like run up and down these vineyard rows to harvest these grapes. And the thing is, somebody started a rumor at this time that that a lot of evacuations were happening in Napa, that ICE was going to be coming to the evacuation shelters, which then compounded the problems that were already going on, because many of these workers were afraid to go to these shelters. And it turns out ICE was not going to do that, but somebody thought it was a good idea to start that rumor anyway. Go fuck yourself, whoever did that.
Jesus.
And so her latest series of paintings that are coming out are depicting many of the things that she witnessed. Just going to pull this one up for you right here, and we'll link to this article here, and you can see a couple of these paintings. They're absolutely stunning. But also, Miss Correa Valencia is also a recipient of a DACA waiver, which is very interesting. I can hear a helicopter.
Yeah, that's the valley for you.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, so this really struck home for her, and she really felt the need to bring this situation to the public's attention that is, vastly overlooked by mainstream media, by a lot of the general public. And these conditions are never really brought to light. So she took it upon herself, and she's doing it in an incredibly powerful way. These paintings are absolutely stunning.
Yeah, and this one that we're looking at here is stunning is an understatement. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, these are absolutely beautiful paintings in the most like just gut-wrenching way you can possibly imagine.
Basically.
So this, Miss Valencia's work is incredibly important. And I mean, she is really just kind of following the dudist path here, and looking out for her fellow travelers in this world, and just she is she is one of those heroes for the time.
Totally.
And so yeah, Miss Correa Valencia, thank you so much for the work that you are doing. You are notably doodly, and I cannot express my gratitude enough for what you are doing for your fellow man.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I had a joke lined up about her work being commended as strongly vaginal, but it doesn't seem appropriate now.
Yeah, yeah.
It is not that. It is
not strongly vaginal, but it is indeed powerful. And I think anybody who sees these paintings will probably come away with a lot more respect and a lot more sympathy for the people who are in these situations.
Well, and you mentioned kind of the dudism of it all, and I think like that's kind of the thing that you see through somebody who's shining a light on an issue through art, right? Like she's not going out and like tackling people and getting confrontational. She's creating art to express concern or express her.
She's going about it in an incredibly powerfully peaceful way. She's not out there, punching Nazis, but she's doing something even better.
She's doing the artistic equivalent of punching Nazis.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The artistic equivalent of punching Nazis. You heard it here, folks.
So yeah, well, hey, I will. I'll drink to that, man. So
yeah. So yeah, Miss Correa Valencia, thank you.
Thank you. And actually, this is a good little segue into our little podcast within a podcast segment that we're going to go ahead and officially name this week.
This kind of just sprang up organically. We had no intention of this actually becoming a thing, but it has.
Yeah, we drink while we record, and we've been highlighting what we drink. So I think we're going to have to start calling this little segment, "Hey man, there's a beverage here."
Yeah, you wanna take us away first?
Yeah, so I am currently drinking Lagunitas IPA. They are a California brew out of Petaluma. I particularly like Lagunitas personally. I've always liked their beer. I also really enjoyed the fact that I think it was before they were bought out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but before they were bought out, they used to underwrite for NPR. And their underwriter message was always just one of my favorite things because it was usually like on This American Life, I think they would underwrite, and their underwriting message was Lagunitas putting the pub in public radio.
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, so I've been a big fan of theirs. I mean, I know they got bought out recently by I think InBev or one of the big companies. But,
I mean, unfortunately, that's happening more and more with a lot of breweries. As someone who works in the beer industry, I have witnessed quite a bit of this over the last few years, where large brewers are unfortunately starting to envelop a lot of craft breweries.
Mm-hmm. Not always for the best, really.
In an attempt to stay relevant, really, because I mean, big beer is honestly, I mean, it's on the decline.
Yeah.
It's been stagnant. You're seeing small declines here and there. They still, produce like something like 98% of the beer that is consumed in the U.S. But they're starting to hurt. And you're starting to. It's like you've seen the rise of the little guy, and that's slowed down a little bit recently in the beer industry, but yeah, you're still seeing these incredibly innovative and creative people making absolutely stunning beer, and Lagunitas was on the forefront of that for a very, very long time.
They really were.
And I mean, so far I have not seen a significant change in quality with them. They're still making magnificent beer regardless of who's passing out the paychecks. So as long as they keep doing that, I can't fault them too much.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, I think, I mean, look, like, it's one of the situations where, like, you can be critical of these breweries, I think, for selling out or whatever, but at the same time, like, when a big company comes with a paycheck or a buyout check of a cool billion or whatever, in some of these cases, like, you can't really fault the small guy for taking that payout, Like, I get it.
It's true. I understand.
Yeah,
I understand. I may not like it, but I have to understand.
Yeah, and I feel like, if it was me, like if I was in that situation, I'd take that cool billion and go start a new brewery, start making another small craft beer.
Sure.
Why not? So
it's what a few of them have done.
Totally, yeah. So, but anyways, yeah, so I'm drinking Lagunitas IPA.
Yeah, I'm currently on my Lagunitas, but here in a little bit, I've got another can here that will provide some nice Foley later in the episode. So what I'm actually going to be drinking here shortly is the Angelica New England Wheat Beer by Lord Hobo Brewing Company. I think I've mentioned Lord Hobo before. They're an absolutely fantastic brewery out of Woburn, Massachusetts. And they are, they're really specializing in like the New England style hazy type beers. And their wheat beer, it's so chewy and substantive and just delicious and crisp, citrusy. And quite frankly, the guy who founded them is a pretty doodly motherfucker. I had the good fortune to meet him a little while back, and he's a lot of fun to hang out with. Big guy, long beard, shaved head. He's exactly the kind of dude you would think would be running a craft brewery.
Sounds
in
about
New
right
England.
For my mental picture.
Yeah, he's got this gigantic long beard and everything, and he he was a lot of fun to hang out with, and I mean these beers between their wheat and their pale ale and their IPAs that they're making, I have yet to have a beer that I have come away with any sort of disappointment.
Nice.
And so I just really highly recommend. They're brand new to the West Coast. You can now find them at a lot of like the specialty liquor stores, so your Bevmos and Total Wines and things like that. So I highly recommend going and checking out Lord Hobo.
Yeah, and if they've made it this far, I'm assuming they're pretty much everywhere else at this point in the country. Well, maybe, but
not necessarily, just because of the fact that our country has like the most ridiculous goddamn liquor laws in the
it's like
world.
state by state,
yeah.
right? So, but we do have a number of listeners on the East Coast, so if you're out there,
you can definitely find it somewhere out there. So if you're on the East Coast, if you're on the West Coast, and if you just happen to be lucky enough in between to come across some Lord Hobo, cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, give it a whirl,
All right.
So, I guess that's as good of a moment as any then to transition to our main topic of the week.
Sounds good.
As previously mentioned, we're going to be talking about the great dude, the dudeliest dude.
The dudeliest of the dudes.
Yeah, the dude. So,
the dude.
So we brought in a couple different resources for this particular... Duder, or El Duderino.
El Duderino.
Yeah.
Those of you not into the whole brevity thing.
His dudeness. So we brought in a couple different resources for this particular one. I know you focus mostly on web resources, and I actually used a book from the library that I work in for this one. Where we can link to these resources kind of either in show notes or on social media.
Sure.
I'll mention mine. It is an essay book from the British Film Institute. It's BFI Film Classics series on The Big Lebowski, written by J.M. Tyre and Ben Walters. Yeah. And you have how many? A handful of web resources? Is that right?
Yeah. I've got like 4 or 5.
Okay.
So I'm pulling from the actual Dudism website, who has a web page devoted to the great dudes in history. This is a great little sort of like primer on just kind of what people. Or primer, I guess. I just said it the British way. Whoops. It's a great little primer on like what the guidelines are we're kind of looking at whenever we start selecting the great dudes in history. And you kind of see where we're coming from and what we're looking at here. So obviously Jeff Lebowski features on this website, seeing as how it's the website of the religion that is based on the movie he's that's about him. Then I also found some really great resources between places like Nerdist.com, RogerEbert.com, and his original review from 1998. Fantastic article for the Washington Post. Talking about that was just published this year, talking about the 20th anniversary of The Big Lebowski and some of how the critics have sort of shifted.
Oh yeah, I've read that.
The original release and today. Where this movie started off being pretty much a financial and critical failure in theaters, and it wasn't until after it came out on video that it really developed the following that it did.
Yeah,
and
totally.
now 20 years on is considered a classic of American cinema. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it's weird how that sort of goes sometimes, and I think actually. It sounds like we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording. It sounds like the Roger Ebert, the original review by Roger Ebert, and also like this book that I was using, kind of speaks to, I think, one of the main reasons why the movie as a whole, but the character of the dude in particular, has been kind of endearing, and especially in terms of kind of like film circles and film kind of criticism circles, because I mean it's one thing to note, and this will probably come up throughout this podcast, but like the Coen brothers as a whole are really. Watching one of their films is really almost like a masterclass in film history and film criticism. Like they really know their source material. They dig
genre
deep,
and character studies.
Yeah, they dig real deep. Every one of their films really is like this, and Big Lebowski is no exception. So I think Roger Ebert touches on this. This BFI book absolutely touches on this.
You're not wrong at all. With that, I will just take us away with a little bit of basic trivia about the dude himself.
Sure.
If the website on History versus Hollywood actually wants to pull up, would be nice. Here we go. So, so the dude in the movie, played by Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges, born December 4th, 1949 in Los Angeles. The dude is actually based on an acquaintance of the Coen brothers named Jeff Dowd, who is a film promoter, producer, who was born November 20th, 1949, in Alameda, California. Interestingly enough, for the film, they actually shifted the dude's birth date to 1942.
Huh.
This movie's supposed to be taking place in 1992. And it really, kind of highlights the era in which the dude came into his own. There's a particularly wonderful scene about, 3/4 of the way through the movie where he's kind of going through his life history after his romantic encounter with Maud, and states that he was one of the original authors of the Port Huron Statement, for people who don't know, that being a anti-war memorandum that was drafted by a group of protesters up in, I believe, Portland.
I believe
was where they were.
Yes, that sounds right. Pacific Northwest, definitely.
Yeah, up there. Or was it Seattle? It was one of those places up there. Was it the Seattle 7?
Actually, yes, I think you're right. It's been a while since I looked directly at that bit of trivia. But
it's I believe it was. So this was a group of protesters up in the Pacific Northwest during the Vietnam War, who, the Seattle Liberation Front was the broad group, of which in real life Jeff Dowd was one of them, and was one of the Seattle 7, who were a group of people who actually were arrested after a protest turned violent, and they were all sentenced to a very short period of time in prison for contempt of court.
Weirdly nothing to do with the actual protest.
Yeah, weirdly enough, had absolutely nothing to do, but they were so disruptive and so colorful in the course of their trial, they were actually sentenced for contempt of court, and I think they all only served like a few months. Total.
Short sentences.
Very short sentences, but they were out protesting the Vietnam War, which notably Jeff Lebowski in the film was also an anti-war protester.
Yeah, he mentions that. It's one of those little like moments you were talking about, his post-coitus scene. There's other little like mentions in the film of his kind of background, and so it's the scene where he's talking to Brandt at the Big Lebowski's mansion, basically, and he's saying like, Brandt's like, he says something to Brandt, and Brandt says, "Oh, you never went to college?" He's like, "Oh no, I went to college, but I spent most of my time occupying, various administrative buildings, harassing the military cadets, the ROTC, the ROTC." Yeah, he basically lists this like litany of things he did in college, quote unquote. Like,
yeah,
it's wonderful.
Probably one of the significant things about Jeff Lebowski being his devotion to pacifism and his dedication to really keeping the peace whenever he can.
Totally, and actually, it's interesting. Just a little side note. They mentioned this in the book I was reading for this piece. But I actually haven't read the entire screenplay. But apparently, there's a quick mention that got cut from the original film, which kind of points directly to this past of his. It's the scene where he's getting beat up by the chief of police in Malibu.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a line that got cut from the film in the original screenplay, I guess they mentioned in this book, where the chief of police basically says, "Are you some kind of like leftover from the '60s?" And like, while he's like laying on the ground, the dude's like, "Yeah."
Well, I mean, that's always one of my favorite moments is in that scene. He's been drugged when he's at Jackie Treehorn's party. By the way, we're going to be covering a lot of, points of the plot in the movie. So if for whatever reason you're still with us and you haven't seen the movie, might be a good idea to watch it.
I might want to double around at this point.
Yeah, because we're going to be getting into some minutia here.
Totally.
But yeah, no, it's he's been drugged. He gets dragged in front of the chief of police in Malibu, and so he's still a little bit out of it. The chief of police goes on this long rant about how much he doesn't like him and all this stuff, and he simply comes back with, "I'm sorry, I wasn't listening."
Yeah.
Chief of police throws a coffee mug and hits him in the forehead, and his reaction is to scream "fucking fascist" at him. Which, yeah, just like it's like that speaks so much to the dude's character when that's his reaction to the abuse that he's receiving.
Which I'll be covering. Actually, that particular scene gets a lot of treatment in the article that I read in this book.
Oh, wonderful!
So I'll be talking a little bit more about that too.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and take us away into that, because I'm going to be doing a little bit more talking about like specific character traits.
Sure.
That we can kind of loop back in and tie into what you're discussing here.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, we'll kind of just go back and forth and through this. So, this particular book, has a chapter titled "What Makes a Man." And it's really kind of a deep dive into the Coen brothers' sort of influences and not only their influences, but also their overall style of portraying masculinity, actually, in their films.
Right. In direct reference to a scene in the movie with the Big Lebowski asking the dude, what makes a man?
Yeah, that is a direct reference. This essay is wonderfully written. It has a bunch of little like Easter egg references and stuff. But basically, what they're positing in this article is that the character of the dude in the Big Lebowski, it stands kind of in direct parody and direct contradiction to your kind of like classic noir heroes, right? Your specifically Marlowe, the character,
Philip Marlowe,
and as portrayed by Humphrey Bogart primarily.
Yeah, and several shots in the film directly mirroring shots from both the Maltese Falcon and the Big Sleep.
Yep, absolutely. So that was kind of the Coen brothers, and like it's essentially kind of at its root in a lot of ways. It's a parody film of like a classic noir, and those two in particular, really. What's interesting is they say basically like, so the Coen brothers, when they kind of came into their own, when they started making films, this was immediately post-Reagan era America, right? And Reagan very much kind of, President Reagan basically very much the sort of like strongman figure, right? Tough on Russia, tough on a number of different topics. And the Coen brothers.
Funny.
Well,
sorry, I was like, I got distracted for a second, and then I realized what you were saying. I was like, that's funny.
Well, and like Ronald Reagan also kind of in his film career, right, portrayed that kind of like archetypal like American manly hero, right? He was the star of a lot of Western films. And the Coen brothers, they basically pause in this article, throughout their entire filmography, basically set out to contradict that image of manliness in their films. Man, that makes Raising Arizona like so much more significant when you think about it. They talked a lot actually about Raising Arizona in this article, because like really like the man, quote unquote, of that relationship is the wife. Like,
oh yeah,
by far. And there's actually direct quotes in this article about that, where if you haven't seen the film, basically like they set out to steal a baby. It's wild, it's wacky, but like there's scenes
hilarious.
But there's a couple of moments of dialogue where like the husband of this like couple basically says like, well, what we need here is a man. We need a man of the family. And the response pretty much always is like, what good is that going to do us? Like that's basically how it's responded to in that film, which is hilarious. And it's played for laughs, but it's also kind of poignant, right? And like this comes up again and again throughout the Coen brothers' works. Let's see. So I had a direct quote in each of their films. Let's see. It would have been better if I could have highlighted this. It's a library book. I can't do that. But so in each of their films, then the Coens offer case studies in the pursuit of manliness as a hiding to nothing, a vain, shallow, and frequently hypocritical exercise in hubris that leaves one at best embarrassed and at worst dead.
Damn.
Which plays out like if you've seen Fargo, right? Like the
Fargo or Blood Simple, or that's like just oof.
Where like the people who are basically putting on airs to like kind of typical manliness, often in those films end up dead, like literally dead. And in The Big Lebowski, you have these people who kind of put on airs of manliness, being completely ineffectual, basically, like
100% just impotent.
Yeah, I mean, probably most notably in the character of Walter throughout the film, where like he holds to these sort of ideals of manliness and of like kind of action and everything.
Plans just constantly make things worse.
Basically.
Same with The Big Lebowski. just having these airs of like his success and his manliness and everything, and in the end just being completely and totally incompetent, and later revealed that he in fact did not actually make any of the money in his empire, and that he's just a face and a puppet to his foundations.
Absolutely. Well, and actually the book even puts it plainly. It says really the Big Lebowski of the Big Lebowski is the Big Lebowski's dead wife, because it's all her money. Maud lays that out, and in the film it's funny, really,
and especially with like the scene between the dude, the Big Lebowski, and Walter, where it becomes this in the end kind of violent confrontation, and you realize that the two characters, Walter and the Big Lebowski, both handle the situation in such an incredibly poor manner that it just leaves everyone hurt and embarrassed at the end.
Totally. Well, and really, so like the character of the dude stands in opposition to these sort of tropes. One note they make here is that, there's two early confrontations in the film where the dude responds in kind of in a doodly manner, contradicting this sort of like manly trope. The first is when the thugs, like at the very beginning of the film, put his head in the toilet looking for the money.
I think I know which part you're talking about. With just the reaction point.
Yeah, and then also where the dude first goes to the Big Lebowski's mansion to try to get a rug.
Yeah.
His response is literally to put on sunglasses and to basically
say, fuck it.
Yeah, basically say fuck it. And they have a note here. It says, so these two early confrontations establish the dude as uninterested in competing with either macho or materialist conceptions of manliness. Treehorn's goons with their well-coiffed hair and ripped biceps seem to represent a porn version of masculinity. It would hardly be surprising if they performed in front of the camera as well as enforcing for Treehorn. Their presence calls to mind, well, it keeps going, but basically like he has no interest in like operating on that level,
right?
Essentially,
So it's a fascinating juxtaposition whenever you have him being violently assaulted at the beginning of the film by the Treehorn thugs, and his immediate reaction after literally having his head shoved in a toilet multiple times is to simply sit down on the toilet, retrieve his sunglasses from the water, and just put them back on and casually sort of, rebut what they keep claiming to him.
Yeah, and it basically like a very pacifist attitude, essentially.
Yeah.
And it comes back around in the next confrontation, really.
Boy, the Foley in this episode is going to be real interesting, because I think somebody upstairs did something that literally sounded like a gong.
But so, and the dude really continues this throughout the film, right? So the second time he goes to the Big Lebowski's mansion, the Big Lebowski has put on all these airs, right? He's got this big scene laid out for the dude. It's clearly rehearsed and everything. And this is actually one of those moments where the dude very much lays it out. He says, like, the Big Lebowski asks him, what makes a man, And instead of saying any of these sort of like manly trope sort of things, the dude literally responds with a biological answer.
Yeah, with a pair of testicles.
Yeah, like he has zero interest in playing this game. Like,
yeah, it's kind of this brilliant attitude that he takes towards these situations, where he's not going to allow himself to literally get drawn into a dick measuring contest in a situation that is like so clearly beneath his interest.
Yeah, and they go on to talk about in this article how the dude basically plays into the kind of classic conception of a dude in a Western, right? Like this sort of emasculated, sort of like city slicker type, right? Who really has no business, being out in the prairie or out in the West with the real men, But the dude like leans right into that. Like, that's like what
it's never
he
a problem for him.
Yeah, and they say, like that particular attitude, the kind of cultural shift from the dude being like the anti, or kind of like the foil or the kind of comic relief of a Western, that ideal sort of changed around the time that the dude was kind of coming into his own politically and personally, right? We're talking like 1960s surf culture and into like the new Hollywood era with films like Easy Rider, right? Like there's a quote in Easy Rider that directly speaks to this. It's like and that goes forward up into the 70s and 80s.
Boy, it's been a long time since I watched that movie.
I've actually never seen it, honestly, but I've pulling from the article.
Fantastic film.
But like by the time you get to the 80s, like this has been entrenched, right? They had a quote in this article from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which I love. And it's a line where like the secretary's explaining Ferris Bueller to like the principal and says like, you know, all these different people like him. They think he's a righteous dude, you know? Like that's where you get to by the time you get to the 80s.
It kind of just makes me think of Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High as well.
Oh, they talk about him a lot in here too. Like he's like the personification, really, for a lot of people of what a dude is.
We'll have to do an episode on Jeff Spicoli at some point in time.
Totally.
Yeah. If I could just find a copy of Fast Times at if any of the listeners out there know where I can get my hands on a copy of that book, because it has been out of print for a long time. And last time I saw it in a used bookstore, the used bookstore literally wanted over $100 for it.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
And I cannot afford that.
Yeah, but they were basically positing in this article that this sort of shift in conception of what a dude is in popular culture kind of plays into exactly what the Coen brothers were going for too, with their sort of shift in focus on masculinity. Like by the time you get to Ferris Bueller, like we're firmly in the Reagan era, you know?
Yeah.
And these characters stand in juxtaposition to that kind of classic conception of manliness. Basically.
Right. And it's kind of funny because you see that you actually do see a shift from like, you know, the kind of like militant manliness of the 60s and 70s, you know, whenever it was like what you were comparing it to is basically the people who were fighting in the Vietnam War.
Totally.
Going into the 80s where it became much more of like the yuppie culture sort of manliness, and yet this sort of juxtaposition, this anti-man
essentially,
you know, has remained fairly constant.
Totally. And the Coen brothers put a couple fine points on that in The Big Lebowski, right? You have Walter really probably is the main one of those, like kind of standing in harsh juxtaposition to the dude, being a man who fought in Vietnam and who kind of clings to all these ideals really to the detriment of everyone around him,
right?
Essentially.
Right. Yeah.
And
we all have that, you know, uber manly friend who's like throwing the suitcase of his dirty undies out the window and you know, packing at all times. So
yeah, and all the way down, they even mention, and this is kind of like the final point from this article, is like this kind of through line of like a redefinition or a reimagining of manliness gets all the way down even to the music. And really it's kind of driven home, they noted, I'll say the line really quick, it's driven home by the Bob Dylan song that features in the movie, where it says, you know, the man in me will hide sometimes to keep from being seen, but that's just because he doesn't want to turn into some machine. Like, it's right there. Like, it's driven home repeatedly throughout the film.
So. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So yeah, and so that I think you know, it's those 2 points of juxtaposition, right? It's the juxtaposition to the classic noir hero, but it's also the juxtaposition to that kind of like societal norm of quote unquote manliness and machismo.
Yeah,
is really the root of the dude's character.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, so I kind of dug into a little bit of internet history here to kind of figure out why the character of the dude is so enduring, why you know, this character from this movie from 20 years ago would inspire a religion, and why, you know, to this day it has been such an impact on our culture and the just the zeitgeist around us. And there are so many things about his character that are so appealing. I mean, for one thing, just, you know, the general sort of like attitude of, you know, take it easy, and that pacifism and that, you know, ability to meet threats and violence and everything with this impassive sort of air that allows the dude to really just roll with the punches. It's a wonderful. It's actually the dude's character is a wonderful example of adhering to Wu Wei.
Oh yeah.
You know, he's surrounded by these extraordinary events that absolutely would, you know, make a lot of other characters, you know, really stumble and fall, and yet he allows himself to be taken on this journey with and allows himself to go through these processes throughout the movie without allowing it to really, you know, affect his personal character.
Yeah.
The dude is, literally at the end of the movie, you have the line, "The dude abides."
Yeah.
The dude is a constant. He is going to be there long after the events of the movie. He has been there since long before, and he is this character who is able to just ride the waves of adversity and not allow it to break him.
Yeah. The stranger puts it succinctly, says he takes comfort in knowing that the dude's out there, taking it easy for all us sinners, Like, you can rely on, in kind of like, call back to the beginning of the film, really. Oh, go for it. Nice. In callback to the beginning of the film,
that was a good one.
That was really good. But it calls back to the beginning of the film, right? Where in the setup, in the initial monologue, he says, "What makes a hero?"
Right.
And kind of answers it at the end of the film.
He's truly the hero for the time.
Yeah, and he's the hero that that you have at that moment, that
right.
is in that moment and of that moment, essentially.
And the other this was a really interesting interpretation that I found actually with an article on Nerdist.com.
Big fan, gotta say.
Yeah, and was posted by Michael Walsh in March of this year, March 6th, 2018.
Just gonna side note, Chris Hardwick notwithstanding, but we're not going to go there.
Yeah,
that's a different podcast.
And this article is entitled "Why the Dude Endures."
Okay.
And they make actually the argument that actually one of the great things about the dude's character is his ability to let things go. And it's kind of interesting because throughout the movie, there are several references made to the dude acting in a very undude manner because
True.
He gets upset. He gets, frustrated. He gets angry. But the amazing thing about the character of Jeff Lebowski is his ability to move past that anger. He may have an outburst. He may have a moment of despair, but he is able to move on beyond that very quickly, and he doesn't hold this negativity within himself.
Well, and oftentimes in the film, you see his reaction to those situations where he gets frustrated, right? Like, so the scene when he's walking away from the bowling alley while the phone's ringing, like, Donnie's like, "Phone's ringing, dude," and he's like, "Thank you, Don." He's like walking away. The next scene, I think, is, it's him like laying on the rug, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
just listening to Dylan.
Yeah, listening to whale sounds or bowling, competitions, laying on the rug.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing how quickly he is able to just compartmentalize these feelings of negativity and move past them.
Yeah. Got that open into.
Yeah. Ooh, nice. Boy, that bottle cap on the table was like boom, 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 boom. I promise we did not just drop a dumbbell on the table. That was amazing.
Nice.
But yeah, it's this wonderful, attitude of, not letting the adversities of the world destroy your morale and destroy your happiness in the end.
Right, and as you said, it's a very Wu Wei sort of concept. It comes back around to the Taoism of it.
It's a very Taoist attitude to take.
Well, yeah, both through Wu Wei, this sort of like going with the flow sort of attitude, essentially, but also in that kind of living in the moment thing.
Right.
That attitude of like, okay, this thing happened, now it's time to compartmentalize that and go live in the next moment, basically. So.
And throughout the movie, you also see this like wonderful attitude of humility in the dude when confronted by all of these characters who exist from without his social circle. You never get the impression that the dude is specifically acting in like harsh judgment against people who follow a different path than him. Say like his interactions with Jackie Treehorn, or his interactions with like Maud or Bunny, or a lot of these, or even all of his interactions with Walter. There is a profound lack of passing judgment in the dude's character. And I think that's like one of the things that really stands out to me is being able to, just kind of like accept that there are other people in the world who follow a different path than you.
Yeah.
And the dude really exemplifies this. He may be frustrated by the actions of others, momentarily, but he's not going to sit there and try to get other people to change their path in order to conform with what he personally feels like he must do.
Right, and it's important to know too. He's frustrated by their actions, not them themselves,
not their person.
Which is, I mean, it's something I find incredibly difficult to do, and I think nowadays in particular, this came at a different time, of course, but like just kind of how hyper politicized things are in the U.S. especially right. Now. Like I can't speak to overseas, but like it's this sort of attitude is exceedingly rare these days. It is
indeed, and I think we could all benefit from taking a little bit more of the dudely approach to our interactions with other people.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else specifically about the dude's character that I really want to cover right now. But I mean, I feel like those are really the standouts that I've always kind of taken away from the film. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there are just infinite other possibilities of interpretation. That's kind of the beauty of watching The Big Lebowski, is I feel like kind of everybody is able to look at the dude and take away something different from his personality and how it really connects to them.
Totally.
So I pulled. Whoops, boy. All right, Kindle decided to kind of freak out on me there for a second. So I pulled actually a verse from the Dude De Ching. Mm-hmm. And I felt like this really stuck out to me as a good chapter to sort of summarize what I see in the dude. And this is chapter 67, Dude De Ching. Of course, Oliver Benjamin's excellent translation and the basis for dudism as a whole. So chapter 67 says, "It may seem that the dude is a bum, but at the same time, he is the man for his time and place. What the fuck are you talking about? Dudeness is both a complicated case and a simple plan. It is only because the dude is both simple and complicated that he can call himself the dude. If a man gets too complex, something always goes wrong."
Nice.
And I mean, I feel like that just really speaks to why the dude is such an enduring character and why he has had such an impact on culture and on cinema and character analysis for 20 years. Mm-hmm. I just feel like it's a very succinct way to look at why the dude is indeed a great dude in history.
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of the Dude De Ching. Last little note, I've noticed they tend to in the translate or in the doodly versions of the verses. Oftentimes, Oliver Benjamin will use doodly in place of like Tao or sagely. And I think that's accurate, right? Because like if you try to define doodliness, like we can talk about historical examples and trends and all that kind of stuff. But really, if you're talking about like the exemplification of, quote, doodliness by the dude in the film, it's a little hard to tack down, right? Like, in the same way that when we tried to talk about the Tao, or when we try to talk about the way, like these are not easy concepts to talk about because really they by definition don't have a definition.
To apply a human term to try and define them is to inherently put limitations upon them, and is just a thing that you can't really do with the Tao, with the way, and with the dude.
With the dude, yeah. So I think that about covers it, at least for now.
So, yeah.
I feel like, well, we talked about earlier, we may at some point double around on Jeff Dowd specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a very interesting man, and I think it would behoove us to cover him at some point. Mm-hmm. But he really deserves his own episode.
Yeah, but I think as far as sort of a primer on the character of the dude, I think we've covered our
I think
bases.
so. I think we have, and like I said, I'm just so bemused that it took us like a dozen episodes to actually get around to this.
Oh man!
I'm like, why didn't we do this like 4 months ago?
Yeah, well, we're taking a real casual pace through this whole thing.
Yeah, we are.
A little meandery,
Yeah, I mean, it is indeed very doodly of us that it took us this long to figure out that we actually needed to do this.
Yeah, we got to keep our classification as a religion and spirituality podcast somehow,
Yeah, that's true. The last few we got a little bit more serious. This time we're letting it go a little bit.
Yeah, but anyway, well, I guess moving on, then we can get to our last segment of the day.
Yeah, I was actually gonna thinking about talking. I'm glad I didn't. Okay, cool.
So getting to the dude of the matter was a segment that I did the research for this week, and I was incredibly happy to see this headline a few days ago, because this has been kind of working its way through legislation now for a number of months, really, better part of maybe a year now, a year and a half.
And I will just say that this is a subject that is very important to both of us, I feel.
Absolutely. So this headline comes from NPR, and it's been covered, I think, by all the major news outlets.
Boy, they are just a treasure trove of good info, aren't they?
They are, man.
NPR, man.
I've been a fan for years. They're
me too. But
one of my favorites.
Jesus, God damn. I have gotten, I think, 4 or 5 of the last few articles that I covered for either Notably Doodly or Getting to the Dude of the Matter, just from NPR's news aggregator.
Mm-hmm. They really do good work. I mean, look, we've said before on the podcast, we firmly support our local libraries. We suggest you do the same. Support your local NPR station too. In any way you can.
NPR and PBS stations are incredibly important to this country,
because they really do kind of that feet on the ground kind of reporting a lot of the time, and in a very I find really even-handed way. They can skew a little bit to the left politically sometimes.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
It doesn't bother me. It's important to be cognizant, I think, of that fact, though.
Sure.
But by and large, I find they tend to be pretty even-handed.
I think they approach everything from a very pragmatic standpoint, and they don't allow themselves to get particularly carried away in the personal views of their reporters.
That's very true. They'll run opinion pieces, not to be sure, but they will clearly define them as opinion pieces. But anyway, so the headline I pulled, this is from September 1st, so yesterday?
Yep.
And the headline reads, California lawmakers pass net neutrality bill. So if you have not been keeping up with the news on net neutrality over the last couple of years, basically this is one of the big things that a lot of people were really worried about with the Trump administration, right, is that the FCC under President Obama actually had passed pretty strong net neutrality protections. And there was dissenting voices at the time, but these were widely considered to be.
For those who are unfamiliar, perhaps, with the whole concept of net neutrality.
Oh, yeah. Well, so net neutrality being the idea that bandwidth in particular, but also any kind of traffic that you conduct or any kind of business you conduct online should be done in a neutral fashion, meaning that your broadband provider would have to provide equal access to anywhere on the web for you.
Sorry. I do not mean to interrupt, but one of these days we're gonna have to set up a camera just to track my face during this thing, because every time I go through these things oftentimes with the earbuds in my ears as we're recording, and so when things start happening upstairs, it's incredibly startling to me because it's very loud, and so there are just moments throughout the podcast where I just start kind of freaking out and looking around.
This episode is going to feature heavily the unofficial third and fourth member of this podcast, my upstairs neighbors who like to walk around loudly.
All right, but I'm sorry for the interruption, but I just had this moment where I had this very loud noise happen in my ears, and it kind of freaked me out there. So,
it's definitely more pronounced when you have the earbuds in. But yeah. So anyway, the idea being for net neutrality is that you have equal access to anywhere on the web. Like if you want to go to NPR's website, or you want to go to Facebook, or you want to go to YouTube, or you want to go watch porn, or whatever the fuck it is, you have equal access to all of those things. That's the idea of net neutrality.
Oh, such a big fan of, I guess, all of them? Sure.
Why not? So basically what happened over the last year and a half, 2 years or so under the Trump administration is that the new head of the FCC, Singh, I think his name is, or Pai, that's the guy's name. He basically, they threw out a lot of these regulations that came into effect under President Obama. That basically opens...
Rolled them back.
Well, rolled them back.
Technically. Yeah, I mean, they haven't been able to legally just, destroy them just yet, but he's definitely well on his way to working towards it.
Well, so the concern being then that your internet service provider would be able to prioritize certain sites over others.
It's like a pay-to-play sort of situation that he's kind of encouraging here.
Right, and the concern kind of broadly from a lot of advocacy groups and just people generally is that creating these sort of like, quote, fast lanes for the internet would, discourage competition. It would discourage,
companies that already have a lot of money, just to pick a random company like Netflix, could pay internet providers to allow them to take the highest bandwidths and speeds, and then that would force some of their smaller competitors, say VRV
or Vimeo
or something like that, into a slower bandwidth, which would then slow down their services to customers.
Right, and the other side of that being that they could then start offering like bandwidth packages to their customers, saying like, oh, you want to watch Netflix? Well, you got to get this particular like premium package, and you're basically
have to pay more to in order to engage these services.
Essentially true. So basically what's been going on in the California state legislature since these rules were rolled back at the federal level is that state lawmakers have been looking to reinforce those regulations at the state level here in California. And they finally did it, basically. Like, this passed through the state Senate, I believe. Yeah.
Just waiting on Jerry Brown to sign it.
Which I kind of expect he will, probably.
Yeah, he hasn't yet, and he hasn't really made any statements on it just yet. But in general, I think Jerry Brown, I think his heart's in the right place in a lot of situations. I don't necessarily agree with him on everything, but he's in general, he's committed to protecting a lot of these things, I think.
Yeah. And what's important to note, too, is that this particular bill had kind of interesting support from a lot of tech companies here in California, right?
Yeah.
Like Silicon Valley tech companies like Apple and Facebook and all these kind of big players online. And really
not so much from AT&T.
Yeah, as I say, the opposition to this sort of bill comes specifically from your broadband service providers like AT&T, Comcast, those sort of companies.
I'm sure Spectrum has a few things to say about it.
I'm sure they do. But so this is one sort of things where, in the absence of federal regulation, states are kind of having to pick up the slack on this particular thing.
Sure.
There was a statement in this article from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a personal favorite of mine. They're a nonprofit that advocates for things like net neutrality and for various other kind of like consumer protections, essentially.
Doing the dude's work right there.
They do really good work. But they basically were saying like this particular legislation could basically be used as a like roadmap or like a blueprint for other states as well. So kind of groundbreaking legislation, but definitely, keeping it doodly, like I've railed a lot recently personally on kind of the evils of greed and capitalism, but like this speaks kind of directly to that, right? Like, keeping the internet as an kind of open place for innovation and for people to express themselves and to access what they want to access unfettered.
It's so much a platform where smaller voices cannot be so easily shouted down, and that's very important in this world where we don't allow these large companies to censor viewpoints that they don't agree with. And that's something that's just like so intrinsically, I guess, American. And
it should be anyway.
Yeah, and at least it should be. And so it's been a very interesting process to watch. And actually, in that article, there are a couple of senators, state senators, that I was very appreciative of, whose names I am blanking on now. One of them, it's his last name's Wiener, but it's not Anthony.
It's Scott.
Scott Wiener. Yeah, the good Wiener.
Yeah.
And then there was one more. There was a female senator who spoke in that article as well, and I really appreciated her quotes.
So she's Barbara Van Schewick. She said, "Today was a landmark in the fight to preserve a free and open internet." That was the statement that I got from her.
So Senators Wiener and Schewick, thank you so much for your work there.
And yeah, it's one sort of, I was going to just say too, I think one of the reasons it speaks largely to both of us, which we've mentioned before on the podcast, is this is, it's an open and free internet. The concept of an open and free internet is not only an incredibly, I think, American and democratic ideal, but also we both come from library backgrounds. This is something that librarians have been very, very, very vehement about and outspoken about.
And podcasters.
Because if you create fast lanes for the internet and you prioritize bandwidth for big companies, smaller companies that do things like host podcasts and promote these sort of things, there's a good chance anyway they'll go by the wayside.
Yeah. And it's very important for those of you who are interested in a free and creative playing field for artistic content and educational content and otherwise, that net neutrality stays relevant and stays up to date. Yeah. So this is a great step forward. I think Jerry Brown's going to sign it, but I will say I certainly hope and encourage everyone who is listening to maybe weigh in on this. Mm-hmm. Contact the state, your state representatives and senators, mm-hmm. And let's make sure that this goes through.
Yeah, advocating for this is important. Full stop. That's really what it comes to. And we have listeners I know all over the country and all over the world. Contact your local reps, contact your governor, contact your state representatives. Tell them, if you don't live in California, tell them you're seeing what's happening out here on the coast and you want to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't promote it enough. And again, like you were saying, this speaks really directly to people who create content online. What we do here is directly affected by things like net neutrality. So,
exactly. Yeah. So great job at the moment, California legislature.
Yeah.
Appreciate what you're doing in this particular regard, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll be, as the FCC, posited, can be something that is replicated by other states. So that's our get into the do the matter, I think, for the week.
I think so. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this week.
Yeah, it's been real. It's been fun.
Yeah, no, I actually had a lot of fun in this episode.
Yeah, a topic that
not that I don't have fun, in a lot of other episodes, but this one's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that was not exactly a chore to research.
So, oh damn, I had to watch the movie again.
I had to read a very well written scholarly essay on the character of the dude. Oh darn. Yeah. But thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and get our housekeeping out of the way, I suppose. Mm-hmm. If you would like to get in touch with us, there's a couple different ways to do that. We have an email address that's pddcast@gmail.com.
Indeed. And you can also get in contact through Twitter. Not as reliable as the Gmail account. That's on me. But yeah, PDDcast, at PDDcast on Twitter. Feel mm-hmm. free to drop me a line. I do have alerts, so if you do something, I'll see it in the email. So
yeah, we're not super active on Twitter at the moment. We are a little more active on Facebook.
Yep.
We did have a fan reach out to us recently on Facebook, actually. So if you'd like to reach out to us there, it is facebook.com/pddcast. Actually, as a result of someone reaching out to us, we are now on Google Play. The podcast is now aggregating out to Google Play.
That's right, folks. We're expanding.
Yeah, we. I will say, at least last time I checked, Google was kind of slow at getting all of our episodes actually uploaded onto their service. I think there's 3 or 4 currently listed there. But over time they should all aggregate to there.
Excellent.
So if you're listening to us on iTunes, great. If you have an Android device, go ahead and look us up on. That was a bit loud.
Ow!
I don't know what my neighbors are doing, but it sounds exciting.
Oh, that hurt.
But you can find us in the Google Play app. Just search Purpose Driven Dude on Google Play app, the actual Play app. I'm not sure if it's aggregated out. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, what are they doing?
It's like they're loading a freighter.
Okay, let's wrap this up. I got to get these earbuds out, man.
But yeah, so go and look us up there. And let's see. I guess we should mention our music for the
Yes.
podcast.
So yeah, our music is 2 p.m. Wake Up Call by the phenomenal band Apache Tomcat.
Yep.
Off of their album Classics by Request.
Yep, highly recommend checking them out.
Yeah,
we're both big fans.
I've got all of their albums on my phone now. It's some of my like work play. I drive a lot for work, so I'm listening to their stuff all the time. And man, just like the spectrum of like punk rock and surf rock and everything that you hear in these albums is phenomenal.
Yeah, can't recommend them enough.
They have a Facebook page as well, so go check them out. Drop them a line. I don't think they're currently touring or anything like that, but I do know that one of the guys is still active on Facebook. So feel free to check them out and drop them a line and let them know that you're still appreciating their work.
Absolutely. And I'd also like to shout out then our podcast network. We are part of Unit 24 Productions. We have a new podcast.
We do.
Well, you have a new podcast.
We do.
So we've been talking about it now for a couple months, but
6,
8. Something like that. But yeah, your new podcast, Zone of the Unknown, is out.
Yeah, so, as of this last Thursday, Zone of the Unknown is live. There are currently 3 episodes up on iTunes. If anybody wants me to try this whole Google Play thing, just let me know. But yeah, we currently have 3 episodes covering Bigfoot, lake monsters, and then the very interesting story of Mr. David Huggins, as I refer to him, I think in the episode, the alien Casanova. So
wonderful.
Yeah, no, please go check that out. It's been a lot of fun recording these with my recording partner Jose, and there's a lot more to come where that came from. So yeah, come and join us as we explore, the weird, the wacky, and the wild, and the mysterious in this world.
Yeah, I think one of these days we're going to set up some plugs to add to the end of our episodes. So maybe look out for a little bit of an ad, an in-network ad. We're not supported advertising-wise by any companies at the moment. So
if anybody's looking to support us, though, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, any of these ways to contact us, we're
looking
open.
at you, Blue Apron.
Yeah, we're open to this idea. But yeah, so I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, no, I think we covered our bases here.
Okay, well, I guess that then grabbed the wrong bottle. That basically just leaves it to saying fuck it, dude.
Fuck it, dude. Let's go bowling.
Yeah.